understand the mystery. First take a look at the history. The words we use will give us clues. So join us now in Church Chatter.
Welcome to the Church Chatter podcast, where we unpack a different church word or phrase each week. I'm Dillon, an ELCA Lutheran pastor.
I'm Sam. I study religious language and culture.
And Sam, what are you thinking about? What is on your mind these days?
Do you stumble because I said one episode that I don't like saying, "What are you paying attention to?" because it feels so economy language.
I do each time.
So yeah, I do too. I hate the phrase, "What are you paying attention to?" How are you spending your time, as if it's all commerce. I hate it. What have I been giving my attention to? Offering my attention to? I have a book that I've been working on for many years, and my work is done pretty much besides promotion, which is what I'm shamelessly doing right now. But I just sent in my final edits. These are all the things that I still needed to change. And the book is called Tongue in Church, a Liberating Primer on Christian Vocabulary. And it should be out in the next few months. I don't know yet. We have a cover, and there's a couple more steps. Then it gets sent to printing, and then I don't know. We have a release date and people can buy it, and I go around and talk about it, and I'm super excited.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you, and it's been fun these past few years to kind of be in the background and hear, drafts read and this and that, and now it's finally come together with a cover, like you said, and ready to go hot on the press to come out in book form.
It's a book about religion and politics, and people don't usually have opinions on religion and politics. So I think everybody who reads it is really going to love everything I have to say. I don't think that's going to be controversial at all.
Oh, boy. Oh, my.
Dillon, what have you been giving your attention to?
Oh, nothing as profound as what you just offered up here. Today, I was with our two daughters, and I was sitting at the kitchen table. I was actually sitting at the dining room table, to be honest. And I usually do work up in my home office, our home office. But today I was downstairs, and all of a sudden I hear like propeller blades, like a helicopter. And from time to time, we hear that around here. There's a local hospital that sometimes, unfortunately, people have to be flown out of to a bigger hospital to get the better care. So I thought, well, perhaps it's that. And this is a little secret about, not really a secret, but something about me. Every time I hear a helicopter, I say a little prayer.
Do you?
I do.
Because it could be health related.
Yeah, because it could be health related. And it takes me back
to my sweetie pie.
And it takes me back to my days when I was doing CPE, which is clinical pastoral education, which is hospital chaplaincy at the Hershey Medical Center, where a lot of helicopters fly in and fly out. And I started this little ritual that every time I'd hear a helicopter, I would say a prayer. And I still do that to this day. But I looked and I went out to our kitchen, and our kitchen has a beautiful view of the whole town, almost the whole town. And all of a sudden I see this helicopter, which is very, very low, so low that it looked like it was landing on the roof of a local church in our town. And all of a sudden I saw that there was something like a cable that was hanging from it. And this helicopter that was hovering very, very low with this huge cable was cutting limbs of trees on a very, very steep bank and hill in our town. I never saw anything like it. It was slightly apocalyptic. It was slightly like, wow, look at this great technology that we have.
What do you think So right away though, when this happened, because you sent me a video, I was driving to work. What did you think at first? Were you like, something's wrong in our town? Or were you like,
Yeah, I
oh,
thought
what an advanced tool?
no, I thought something was wrong in town. And when I have seen helicopters with cables connected, I'm thinking of like Black Hawk Down movies where people are going to start sliding down
Mm.
and people are coming out of the
I grew
helicopter.
up near the Susquehanna River, and then for 5 or 6 years, I lived. My front yard was the Juniata and Susquehanna River meeting. So when I heard helicopters and I saw something dropping, I knew it was river rescue. That's
Right.
where my brain
Oh,
goes.
right,
Like,
oh, right.
bad.
Right. So I didn't know what it was until I went on the our back porch on our back porch, and I noticed that it was like hovering back and forth. It was swaying back and forth, and
Hmm.
it had this huge attachment, and it was just trimming branches. And then it kind of flew a little bit more north, and I could still see it, not as good, but still see it. And it was cutting limbs over there too. Never seen
So
anything like.
strange.
Never
I don't
seen anything
understand
like
how a
that.
helicopter could not, in my mind, you would accidentally go a little too far and hit a building or something. I don't
Well,
understand the physics.
I was thinking too. I mean, this is a huge piece of machinery hanging off this helicopter, and also, what is the liability of flying a helicopter? Because once it was done one section, it kind of went up a little bit, but not too much, and then went
Near
over the rest.
train tracks? Did it seem like it was near the train tracks? Is that like a
Yes,
train
yes,
thing?
it was in the train. Well, not on the train tracks, but it was near the train tracks, and I'm thinking a piece of equipment being flown over buildings and people's homes like that, if that thing really, I mean, there's a lot going on there.
Did the
Um,
girl, you take Tabby and Sophie to see it?
no, it was too cold to
Mm,
see it
yeah.
outside, so I took a kind of a close-up video, and
Yeah.
well, I sent it to you, and then I showed them inside. Tabitha was not interested, and Sophia thought it was just great.
Yeah. Well, you want to hear a really clever segue?
Yeah.
It's good news that nobody was hurt. So today is episode 70, and we're talking about the word gospel, which is related to good news. That was good. That was
That's very
clever.
good.
Okay, so Lent began. Are you ready to jump into it?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Lent today is, we are recording this on February 24th.
Yeah.
Lent this year, in the year of our Lord 2026, began on February 18th. And Lent, we need the Gospels, right? To tell the story of Lent, we need the Gospels. So let's talk about that word gospel. It's political. It's political. It has everything to do with the Roman Empire. So gospel and good news both come from the same Greek word. Pronounce the word for us, Dylan. I always get it wrong. Is it a hard G?
What are you talking about?
Evangelion,
Oh,
evangelion, evangelion.
Evangelion.
It does not roll off the tongue. But anyway, gospel and
Yeah.
good news both come from the same Greek word. It can also be translated as an announcement. And it actually comes from the Old English word, Godspell, meaning good news, right?
Yeah.
So here's some context before we get into the Roman Empire. An evangelist is the title given to those who wrote the Gospels, right? So we can see the linguistic connection here. And it means good news giver, this evangelist, right? And it comes from the same root as the English word for angel, meaning messenger. So the Greek word means good message, right? And then we have these 4 books in our Bibles. There's many Gospels, but the 4 that we have, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, has its root in the Roman Empire. So before Gospels even existed, before Christianity even existed, the government announcements in the Roman Empire. So remember, the Roman Empire just kept conquering different regions, conquered the Jewish people, conquered the Greeks later, like just all of these groups, right? And they kept getting bigger. And there were these government announcements offering good news for the citizens of the Roman Empire. And this was referred to as gospel or good news or evangelion. And these were political gospel announcements. And they were often about things like war victories, but also specifically about the emperor's birthday. So let's just get really specific.
And not just the birthday though. It was the birthday. It was also the day, the accession day when they would come to the throne. And it was also when they would die, when they would ascend.
Yeah, which is why you can see the shape of our gospel stories that we have about Jesus take the shape of the same times that there were gospel announcements in the Roman Empire. We make a big deal about Jesus's birth because they made a big deal about the emperor's birth. We make a big deal about Jesus's death because they made a big deal about Jesus's death. We make a big deal about Jesus's ascension because they made a big deal about the emperor's ascension, right? All of these things. We make a big deal about the cross and Good Friday because we see that as a victory, as a third way, about like, hey, there's another way to deal with power. And they made a big deal about their own victories at their war. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, military victories, right? Yeah.
Which, of course, Jesus was not a military warrior. He chose a third way that we are all called to do if we are follow the Jesus followers. But let's get more specific. The good news or gospel is a political phrase. It originates from Gaius Octavian, who was Rome's first emperor, and he ended a war. Have you ever heard of Cleopatra and Mark Antony? So Gaius Octavian ended a civil war by conquering Mark Antony and Cleopatra, right? So he's the guy who put an end to that romantic story. And he was given the title Augustus, which means exalted one. And there are, I'm becoming a coin nerd. Like, I think that ancient coins and inscriptions are fascinating in history. Are you laughing?
Yeah.
If I had more money and resources, I'd want to collect the coins. I just think they're so cool. And I know like originals are very expensive and hard to find, but even copies, I just want like a coin collection. But like Roman coins specifically related to the Jesus story. Okay. So ancient inscriptions identify Augustus's birth, Gaius Octavian, right? Augustus's birth as the beginning of the gospel or good news or of his reign, right? So ding, ding, ding. Like if you know anything about the Jesus story, over and over again, what we see, and we see it here with the gospel too, is a story that belonged to the Romans who conquered Jesus's people. The Christians, later Christians, but more specifically the early Jesus followers before Christianity ever existed, hijacked that story and like transposed it over Jesus, which I think that some people could hear it and be like, oh, then the Jesus story is nothing. No, it's actually everything because of that. If Jesus just dropped out of nowhere and he wasn't in the Roman context, his story wouldn't have lasted, I'm convinced. It's because of the backdrop of the Romans that made his message so radical and dangerous and subversive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So later emperors, after Gaius Octavian or Augustus, later emperors and their birthdays continue to be seen as gospel or the beginning of the good news or the beginning of their reign. And how, again, this is how future generations came to view Jesus's birth. So I really just want to reiterate that calling stories of Jesus gospel or the Gospels is a direct political statement against empire. Against empire. It's saying there is good news and it doesn't come from the victories of Rome. Or to be a little more theological and bring it into our current context, there is good news and it's not the victory of our president arresting people in the streets. There is good news and it doesn't come from the empirical political system that we are all, our necks are under the boot of them. That's not the good news. Jesus is the good news. Point your attention there. That's what it means when we say the stories of Jesus are gospel. That's all I got. Was I clear enough?
Yeah, that's all you have.
Yeah. I just wanted to say the Roman Empire stuff. You know, that's what I care about.
Oh, okay.
What do you have? Anything else to add?
Yeah, I have some things here that I wrote down.
About it.
Let me get to where I was here. I think one of the most interesting things about the Christian New Testament is that even though you can read about some debates back and forth, there are four Gospels, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. They are all telling pretty much the same story in that they're relaying the life and teachings of Jesus. But their diversity is welcomed. And so I think the Christian faith should and could and does in some ways welcome the diversity of the same story. Does that make sense?
Yes, sort
Okay.
of.
So
Are you
we
trying to say that it's different perspectives of the same story? Is that?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
In the Roman Empire, we have something very centralized, and we have something that is coming kind of top down.
Yeah.
These proclamations, these gospel proclamations, are coming top down, and you can look at the four gospels in a way of kind of a bubbling up of here are individuals and groups of people who are telling the same story, but in four slightly different ways with different emphases on the same story. And the tradition has and still remains that we have these four stories that tell about the good news and the gospel of Jesus, but they're tweaked in a little bit of a different way. And so they allow for kind of nuances and different takes and different ways of seeing the one story. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That was very different than what Rome wanted. Rome was kind of saying this way or the highway type of a thing.
Rome also wanted to control the narrative. They wouldn't
Right,
have allowed multiple stories about an emperor going around.
right,
They wanted one story.
right,
They wanted to control it.
right. And so there in the Christian Gospels about the life and teachings of Jesus, we see.
Wait. It's almost like in current empires, if somebody in charge were to control what journalists were allowed in the room. It's almost like that kind of controlling the narrative. Anyway, keep going. Keep going.
That was beautifully on
Is
the
it
nose.
subtle?
Beautifully on the nose. We've talked about this in other. I'm going to get to this here. We talked about this in other episodes, but just to emphasize this gospel, this telling of the gospel story, there was kind of four understandings of the good news or the gospel that was coming out of the Roman Empire, and there were clear proclamations of who the Roman emperor was. That the Roman emperor was the savior, that the Roman emperor was the Son of God, the Roman emperor was the Lord of the world, and the Roman emperor was the Prince of Peace, bringing what was known as the Pax Romana. Okay, the bringer of peace, the Prince of Peace. It's interestingly enough, we see that all four of those titles, Savior, Son of God, Lord, and Prince of Peace, are gospel proclamations that are shared within Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that are now not given to the Roman emperor, but given to Jesus of Nazareth, who we believe is Christ's Messiah and God's Messiah and anointed one.
And I want to pause there.
And that's very powerful.
Yes, I love that you say it. And I know that if people listening have heard every episode, I know that sometimes it can be like, oh, they said that before. Yes. Because what we're trying to do with this podcast, what I'm trying to do with everything, all of my work recently has been, it just rubs me the wrong way when people are like, I don't want my pastor to get political. Churches shouldn't be political. It shouldn't be partisan. And I agree. Pastors and in church, we should not belong to communities that tell us who to vote for, because we belong to the party of Christ, the anointed one, Messiah, not the party of some political thing, right? Where are you really allegiant to? Not to say that you can't have a political party, but you know what I'm saying. However, Jesus wasn't crucified by the Romans because he wasn't political, right? You don't get killed by the Romans for not being political and minding your own business, right? And so all of those words that you just said, Lord, Savior, salvation, Prince of Peace, Son of God, all of them over and over and over and over again, the language points to Jesus was a political figure as much as he was a spiritual and religious leader.
Right.
And that's really, really important, because if not, we can turn Christianity into this overly spiritualized, like, if I'm nice to everybody, then I go to heaven and I'm good forever. No, are you protecting Are you protecting people? Are you standing up for the marginalized? Are you taking a stand? Are you putting yourself in dangerous situations when you need to? Anyway, I'm getting preachy. Go ahead, keep saying. I just love what you
Uh,
just said.
yeah, well, these are the last four things. So there's this kind of, as the Roman Empire is making these kind of top-down proclamations of the gospel, of their understanding or version of the gospel. Um, they are doing it through military force, through top-down structural ways of being in the world. They are doing it through rioting and pillaging communities. And if you don't follow them, then you'll be executed.
Mm.
You'll be executed. They did allow, I'm going to give them a little grace, they did allow for some local incorporation of certain things. I'll give them that. But overall, they were
No,
what?
they allowed for some people to keep their religion if you offered sacrifices and prayers to the emperor, to your god, because the Romans believed all the gods are real. Might as well not chance it. So you get to keep your temple and you can still have your Jewish faith. However, you need to make sacrifices daily to the emperor and you need to
Yes.
pray daily for the emperor. So that
Yeah.
was their thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is true. And they also did some of these things so that they would not create mass riots because they wanted absolute control. And so
Yeah.
they would make it look like they're giving you a little bit of what you want, but really in the end,
Yeah.
uh,
Well,
they they had full control over you.
Well, they're the ones who appointed the high priest of the temple. So even
Right.
they're the person in charge of the temple. They said, no, it's going to be, we need to approve who it is. We're
And
going to
even
appoint that person.
and even some of the local kings in different jurisdictions, they were all obviously approved by the Romans.
That's
So it's
also that's also why there's so much chatter in the gospels about you can only serve one God, because Herod, who famously wanted Jesus and all the little boys killed, he was appointed by the Romans but also serving the temple, and we see that he was trying to serve two gods, the emperor and God of Israel, right? He was trying, and we know that because of the work that he did at the temple, but also what he did for the Romans. He was trying to please them both. And oftentimes, as I think we will all come to find, and I've found a couple times in my life, and I'm sure I will find many, many more times, is sometimes you can't please them all. So you have to turn your direction towards the Jesus story of God if that's where your loyalty lies, and let everything else crumble if it must. You know what I mean?
yeah. So one of the things that Rome was not very keen on offering is forgiveness. So if you did something wrong, or you sinned, or you broke a law, or broke whatever a statute, there wasn't much forgiveness. The Roman Empire was not known overly for being very forgiving. In the Jesus story, and the story that comes out of the Hebrew scriptures, and then Jesus of Nazareth himself, his whole life and ministry, that we would now call it, was about forgiving people, bringing them back home, or bringing them back into the community, even when they had done something wrong. So it was all about restorative correction and forgiveness, instead of punitive. You did this, and now you're going to pay for it. And actually, we're going to put you in the town square, and we're going to crucify you, or we're going to do something like this. So the idea that Rome was not very forgiving, and Jesus had a message of forgiveness.
And he
And
was called the Redeemer, and even that word has its roots in empire because under the empire's society, many people had to sell themselves into enslavement. And if you did something wrong as an enslaved person, you were sold to someone else. And what would happen is either your old enslaver or a male in your family, long story short, could come and buy you back, right? Redeem, to redeem means to buy the slave back, right? Or to buy you out of slavery, right? So whenever we say that Jesus is the Redeemer, we're also taking that language of like, you were enslaved before, but we are going to pull you out of that. We are going to come rescue you from it and forgive you for what you did, kind
and
of
forgive
thing.
Right, and redeemed also comes out of the word remedy, and forgiveness is a remedy to that which has been broken.
Yes.
It's not
Also
about
mercy,
what's that?
a lot of
Mercy,
mercy
yeah,
talk with
mercy,
Jesus, right? Because
yeah,
again, everything about the Jesus story is first and foremost about being anti-Roman Empire. I have a
right.
lot of energy today.
No, that's good. Must be the jobby coffee.
Yeah.
Um, I can't get past the aftertaste, but that's for a
You
different
get
episode.
used to it.
And then the last three things that I'm thinking, kind of the contrast, compare and contrast. So we talked about the the non-forgiveness of Rome and the forgiveness of Jesus. And then we see this idea of justice, justice for the poor and the widow and the orphan and the unhoused and the sick and the dying and all these people who were kind of left out of the metropolises of Rome and kind of just like scattered. They never saw the Pax Romana. They never saw the fullness of peace and justice, and they were being taxed unmercifully. And there was not a lot of justice going on. And Jesus's life and message was about uplifting the poor, caring for the unhoused, helping people who were in prison, healing the sick and the dying, giving them comfort, and feeding people and clothing them when they were cold and unclothed. And so, this idea of justice, really, Jesus lived this out because at every turn, Rome was mostly turning their backs on many people who were throughout the empire. There was no justice for people, and so Jesus's way was offering them justice, right? And then the third thing is that I was thinking about in terms of good news or the sharing of a gospel proclamation is self-sacrifice. Jesus in the Gospels is said to, he didn't come to be served, but to serve. Now, that has been taken out of context, and people feel like they have to be serving people all the time, and they're tired, and they're worn out, and they're moody, and they're frustrated because they're being a servant all the time. And that's not exactly what that means. But what it does mean is this, that if you follow Jesus, as a Christian or a person of goodwill who's following Jesus, we follow the example that we have not come to sit back and be served, but to be servants to others so that others will also be servants to us. It's about community and connection and relationship to be servants of one another to make the world a better place. If you were to look at the courts in Rome, and you would see very quick, and just through a little historical reading and documentation, there was no such thing as self-sacrifice in Rome. It was absolute egotistical um, uh, arrogance, that it's about the people who we conquer that will serve us. We're not going to serve them. Rome did provide certain things like aqueducts and roads and other types of things, but most of this stuff was once again to maintain absolute control. They would cut things like that off from people. So yes, they offered public services, but with the kind of quid pro quo of keeping people intact. Jesus's way of not coming to be served, but to serve, is seen in a communal way, going back to understanding justice and uplifting people who are on the margins. And so, uh, Jesus, as a servant, and followers who also serve like Jesus, is something very counter empire.
Yeah, that comes to my mind is the old images. They're kind of Greco-Roman, but like an emperor being fed the grapes, right? Of like, I'm in power, which means I'm going to be served. And I know that a lot of leaders, if you study leadership, a huge thing recently has been servant leadership or
Yeah,
top-down leadership. Um, and even some people on their hierarchies in organizations, it used to be like CEO or president or whoever up here, and then like the pyramid underneath. And people have actually visually flipped that, which I love, which is actually it's all of us, which is very democratic, by the way. It's supposed to be our votes and the common people are up here, and the person who's leading is actually at the bottom because they're serving all of us. That is a Jesus legacy thing, right?
Yeah.
Jesus was historically a shift in that way of thinking. And then 2000 years later, here we are, and people actually are finding that, yeah, there's something about humans that whenever the leader is a servant to them, the group actually works better than if the leader is authoritarian and egotistical and I know best, right? But whenever the leader acts as a servant, there's something in our DNA that responds better to it. And there's research to show that now, which is really interesting. And Jesus knew inherently that like, I serve people and this is how the group functions better.
Yeah. And the last thing, through forgiveness and justice and self-sacrifice, comes kind of the fullness of God's kingdom, or the almost fullness of God's kingdom, rather than imperial rule. And God's kingdom, in many ways, not exactly, but one of the ways that many biblical scholars and theologians can talk about God's kingdom can be summed up. It can be summed up in other gospels, but in Matthew's gospel, I think it's chapter 25, which speaks about the Beatitudes and Jesus's Sermon on the Mount and Sermon on the Plain. The Sermon on the Plain is in Luke's gospel. The Sermon on the Mount is in Matthew's gospel, and you see that the kingdom of God is about inheriting the goodness of creation, the relationship between people, and the love of one God who has given breath to us all. And when we're in relationship with each other, when we see people on the margins and we bring them back, and we really get to know each other, that brings about God's kingdom on earth. It brings heaven to earth, like the Lord's Prayer talks about, where imperial Rome was more about expansion, and kind of not very relational, but kind of once again top down. This is what you must do in order to yada yada, right? That's not how God's kingdom works, ever, and that's not the teachings of Jesus, who came to kind of give a fulfillment of God's kingdom. So all four of those things, forgiveness, justice, self-sacrifice, and God's kingdom, all of which Jesus emulated, are so counter Rome. And to me, and I think I shouldn't say I think, and to you and to many other people, that is the capital G gospel truth.
That's good news.
That's good news.
Yeah, that's good news. And it took me a long time to like understand for myself, what does that mean? But God help us all if our political system and those in power is where our hope lies. Thank goodness there's an alternative way that's been modeled for us. Like there's another way to have meaning in life, and it's not about accumulating wealth and power in the systems that be. It's about being a part of a community, and it's about being present, and it's about bringing the way of heaven here to earth until they are merged into one, right? That's good news. That brings peace.
Yeah. And that'll preach.
That'll preach. That'll preach. Stay curious.
Stay curious.
To understand